Thank you, Amy. And thank you all for taking the time to join us this morning. And thank you to my esteemed panelists. We have a great lineup today. With me, we have Dylan DeAndra, the Field CTO at Doppel, Willie Hicks, Global Field CTO of Governance and Public Sector at Dynatrace, Nick Marinos, the Managing Director of IT and Cybersecurity Issues at GAO, and Victoria Jan Piliteri, the Cybersecurity Lead at NIST. So thank you all. So
Thank you very much, Sarah. Glad to be here with you.
yes, okay. So last event was the first time I thanked the panelists, and they said thank you back. This marks the second time in my 5 years of moderating that
Let's
that
not
happened.
break that snap streak.
Yeah, I know. I'm just gonna stare at people until they respond to me from here on out. So throughout the conversation, we'll discuss how agencies can securely integrate AI into cyber operations, adapt defenses to leverage some of the AI-enabled tools, and then translate the guidance and best practices into operations. So to kick things off, Victoria, I'd love to start with you to chat through some of the standards from the NIST perspective. So,
Go ahead.
all
Go
right,
for it.
all right. What are foundational cybersecurity capabilities that agencies need to have in place before they scale AI across their environments?
Well, I think first and foremost, a strong foundational cybersecurity and privacy risk management program is essential to making sure that you are ready to adopt the latest and greatest technology, whether it's AI, whether you're getting ready for PQC, whether there's another acronym that is hot off the press. So having that strong program, understanding your risk tolerance, your strategy, how you respond to incidents, having all that in place really doesn't change. Those foundations, cyber hygiene does not change. What we're seeing is an explosion in the application of AI, especially now, and an eagerness by all parties, whether it be the seller, the buyer, or the people that we serve, to integrate this to improve how we do things, the quality, the speed, making everything better. But we have to consider what that new risk profile, what those new threat surfaces, what those new attacks could be as a result. In this case, NIST is working on a broad portfolio of standards and guidelines to help both agencies, private sector, vendors, anyone in this ecosystem better understand how do we evaluate what these risks are that we know. How do we leverage what we have in place already in our enterprise systems, and what's new and unique, and how should we try to manage those risks? Because ultimately it's about risk management. We will never mitigate risk down to zero, and if that's your expectation going in, you're fighting a losing battle. I will say on the standards front, it is kind of challenging because we are in a time that we are building the airplane as we are flying it, like mid-air. So a lot is evolving, which is why in a lot of the cases of our work at NIST, we both provide that kind of current best practice as well as our methodology. So not only can we continue to evolve our work, you can apply and evolve what you've already deployed as well. So that's a high level one.
Yes, that's a great overview. And throughout the day, Amy opened the event saying, AI used to be seen as an emerging capability, but now it's here. You mentioned PQC. Jake Glassman talked a lot about how quantum computing is going to change how we develop technologies, scale, research. So Dylan, I'll turn it over to you next. The attacks are no longer phishing emails. We're seeing, along with the innovations, the evolutions of deep fakes. So how should federal agencies rethink cyber defense when attackers can coordinate campaigns across these different channels?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it to the audience. Raise your hand if you've received one of those text messages from FedEx or from the toll booth saying that they're going to take away your license if you don't pay $500 and click this link right now. How many of you have a grandmother or her friend, Aunt Sadie, who had her entire retirement savings taken in one click of a Microsoft support call? This is what we're dealing with today because the unit economics of generating scams, fraud, impersonations, and cybercrime the cost of goods sold has gone through the floor. it's virtually zero now. Any 14-year-old in his mom's basement wearing footy jams can now have nation-state capabilities for $49.95 a month. And so what you're seeing is this volume, velocity, and variety of attacks, not just in your traditional phishing emails that you're seeing out there today, but you're seeing these across WhatsApp, across the encrypted channels like Telegram, Signal, across paid ads, across telcos, across your traditional spoofed domains. But we're seeing that variety of multi-channel attacks coming today, and it's all accelerated by generative AI. And so my perspective is, if I'm Scattered Spider, if I'm Shining Hunter, or if I'm the Lazarus Group, one of these major cybercrime groups, I'm going to use as many avenues of attack as I can, and I'm not going to attack the hardened systems that you're developing standards for, Vicky. What I'm going to go after is the humans that manage those systems. I'm going to go after your help desk. I'm going to go after your server admins. I'm going to go after your finance team, after the executive admin for the general. And that's how I'm going to compromise the mission. That's how I'm going to erode trust and authority in our government agencies and in our Department of War. And that's what we're faced with today. So it's no longer consideration of this is just a single channel attack vector. Now you have to think about a multi-channel coverage. And oh, by the way, when the SOC, the Security Operations Center, sees an alert come in because a phishing email was reported, but then you also get the gift card scam from the CEO, and you get the telephone call, and you also get all these other attack vectors. All different departments are seeing these individual alerts, but nobody sees the entire campaign. So one thing that I would encourage is to take a step back. And in the intelligence community, we called it the mosaic effect. When all these little tiny tiles come together, then you can see the Mona Lisa. And we, as a federal agency, as a Department of War, as an intelligence community, we need to take a step back and look for that mosaic effect.
Yeah, my spam texts come from Michael Hoffman, our president here, and I'm like, okay, Mike, so you don't need a $50 Google Play card, right? So Nick, from GAO's perspective, what are you seeing as the biggest governance or implementation gaps to deploy AI for cybersecurity?
Yeah, I'd say I'm going to step back to the 90s. Back in the 90s, 30 years ago, GAO put information security as one of its high-risk areas to government. It's actually the first government-wide issue that we raised the alarm on. So that was 30 years ago. The things that we talked about for why we did that at that time was the pace of technology was getting way far ahead of the governance structures themselves. Tone at the top, management wasn't fully informed and aware of just what the true risks really were. And that vulnerabilities were all over the place. That was 30 years ago. Nothing's changed. And in fact, it's gotten a lot worse. Even though we've put in place a lot of great pieces of legislation, we've got Vicky's crew and NIST putting out some really important standards and guidance that not only we use to assess how agencies are maturing in terms of their risk management capabilities, but we've also seen the creation of CISA. We've seen the National Cyber Director's Office be established. So there are some really good steps that are being taken. The issue with cybersecurity and the threats themselves, which is even more exponential now, is that from a legislative, from an oversight perspective, we are always in react mode. And I think the challenge right now that truly exists is that there are just so many implementations of AI happening within federal government agencies, in the private sector that manage critical infrastructure, on top of what obviously the attackers now have the capability to use, that it leaves us definitely behind the eight ball when it comes to legislating in a way that's going to be effective at actually helping federal agencies themselves and the entire nation protect itself. So just thinking a couple of examples in that regard, think about how quickly the way that people are working is changing. So the behaviors of a human are definitely changing much quicker than policies, rules, and acceptable behavior on how to use devices might happen too. On the other side too, things like privacy, personal information may not be in the front of people's mind when they're implementing AI, and all of a sudden now you've got PII that could potentially not only be, getting out of the perimeter of an organization, but now could be fed into the learning of the models themselves too. So I think that's probably been the biggest area of challenge.
Yeah, and Willie, as we talk through some of these areas of challenge areas, guidance that Victoria mentioned earlier, how should agencies translate some of these best practices from frameworks or what we should be doing to actually get it into what we are doing?
So I would say, first of all, Victoria, everything you laid out already is critical because those frameworks are setting best practices. They're setting out what good actually looks like, and I think it behooves the agencies to then translate that into actions, things that decisive steps that your operators, your analysts, your employees can follow. And so that translation in my mind, and how I think about it, and I look at it from industry standpoint, but also from the agencies I work with, I think that agencies, when they're thinking about that translation, they should focus on consequences. What is the consequence of this AI that I'm implementing? And by that I mean, if you think about it, AI can sit on a spectrum, and that term I probably should have used that differently. But if you think about it, on one end you've got AI, so you could do really mundane things. I can summarize an email. I can, translate something from one language to another. You can go to the other end of that, and I was listening to the other talk, and they've already talked about Anthropic and OpenAI and some of these models that are breaking out of their sandboxes. They're hacking other competitors and other companies. They're planning malware to actually extract IDs and doing things that were never intended. So I think agencies should really be thinking about those consequences and saying, how can I take the standards organization like NIST guidelines and now translate those into effective safeguards? How do I, take that and make sure that I'm putting in policies that are ensuring that I have safe AI, that I have the right permissions in place, that my teams know how to use it, when to use it, what data I can put in it, what data not to put in it. All of those things, I think that's where we start with the frameworks, and then you need to translate that based on the consequences that could, be impacted by these different types of models. And I look at, from just an overall standpoint, though, that the agencies that are doing it best are the ones who are, really focusing on, making the right decisions based on the model types and what those models can do. So that's my thought on it.
And Victoria, is there anything that you would like to add from the standards organization?
As Willie said, context is king, right? NIST GAO and our best practices and in their findings and our guidelines will provide that translation layer, those common foundational aspects and outcomes that every organization is looking to do. But it really is, how do you translate that and how you apply it to your organization to manage your unique risks? Nick talked about some of the unique cybersecurity and privacy risks that we are facing as we adopt AI into our enterprise, into our business and our operational workflows. So how do we really make that clear? What is unique about those risks? Because I think broadly, agencies understand risk management now for cybersecurity. They are doing best practices. They are implementing the standards and guidelines. They should be. How do we extend it for the right new set of risks and the right new context to serve the mission?
Yeah, and Dylan, I'd love to turn it over to you next. So when we talk about, we have the foundational tools in place. We have threat detection, takedowns, email security, workforce training, but sometimes it remains siloed. So why is that siloed model becoming less effective against some of the AI-enabled threats that we're seeing? And what would a more integrated defense strategy look like?
I think it goes back to my earlier point about the mosaic effect, because if you've got the email team getting one alert, you've got the SOC getting another alert about our vulnerability, you've got the comms team getting an alert about someone infringing upon the agency's brand or identity, you've got another physical security team that's seeing threats against the protectee. And so each one of those is an individual symptom, but it's not the entire sickness. It's not the entire campaign that the attackers are using. And so that siloed approach is good for specialization of labor and division of workloads. However, it is not the entire campaign. And so, again, going back to that mosaic effect, zooming back out to 10,000 feet and understanding what the attacker's doing, what they're coordinating, how they're doing this. Because the attacker out there isn't thinking, well, first I'm going to send an email, and then I'm going to send a text, and then I'm going to build a spoofed domain, and then I'm going to run a paid ad. No, what they're doing is this is all part of a coordinated campaign. So much like in a military campaign, you have specific orders of battle, and that order of battle may come in different formats or at different timings, but it's all a coordinated campaign. So that being said, I think the siloed approach is great for division of labor and focus. However, there has to be an intelligence sharing. There has to be a coordination layer that overlays that. And you've got Vicky with the standards, right? You've got Nick with the enforcement and the accountability there. And you've got Willie with the telemetry. And so all of those things should be coming together in a concert-like effect, as well as at the sublayers or the substrates where you've got the operational and tactical teams that are doing the mission day to day. But if they're not sharing that information and understanding what the complete zeitgeist is, I got to use zeitgeist in a sentence today. Thank you.
That's cool.
You've got to be able to see that entire overview and approach to be able to understand how the battlefield is shaping around you.
So the entire zeitgeist, I got to use it in a sentence today too, or at least a partial one. So when we're thinking about that, Nick, I'll turn it over to you next. How should agencies be approaching visibility into some of their AI systems and tools that they're using?
I think they should fully implement the NIST cybersecurity framework right out the gate.
Plug.
Gosh, that's hard to do in this day and age, right? And it's even harder to do it when each of us is trying to understand what our relationship is with AI from a professional perspective, from a defensive perspective as well. And I think part of the challenge there is that, you polled the audience, and in my head I was thinking, in the last 2 days, I've helped at least 4 family members with something that looked sketchy, and thank God they asked me, because the answer always was, yeah, don't click on that, right? So part of it is, on the positive side, that means that I think everybody is becoming even more of a professional skeptic, which at GAO, we come in and are trained half glass empty, until we prove otherwise. But I think that's really going to have to be the case. So how does that translate into oversight? Well, first of all, federal agencies, the private sector, do need to be cautious in how they're entering into leveraging AI. And that's increasingly more difficult. So thinking about scenarios where AI is automatically added to software that they already have a license for, and before you know it, now you got to think about, okay, how is this AI now going to be affecting the way that I protect information that I have to protect in certain ways? So thinking about it before implementing is critical and more challenging. To do that, you also have to know what you have out there. And what we found just a few years ago is that although we found about 1,200 AI use cases at that time across the major 24 agencies, most of them had no idea if that was it. There was no solid inventory, and you can only imagine now 3 years later the exponential increase in the amount of use of AI too. So what that means is coming back to foundational pieces. So a shout out to Vicky's crew, because overlaying a lot of the foundational elements about what does it mean to manage risk, not to eliminate it, is really where Congress is thinking about it. If you look at a lot of the AI safety bills, think about the need for us to update key legislation. It's really more about stepping away from thinking that we're going to address all the vulnerabilities, but more so thinking about how can we close the door as much as possible, and then how can we be very quick to respond and react when there is an incident as well.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. And speaking about helping family members, I had to tell my mom that Jared Leto did not follow her on TikTok, and he does not want to go on vacation with her. She was devastated. So, Willie, I'll turn it back over to you. How do you think agencies should be approaching visibility into AI? Is there anything you'd like to add on what Nick said?
So, and that really kind of sits right in our space. So from, a telemetry standpoint, from a visibility standpoint, I believe that's one of the key components, because and Nick, I think you were mentioning this, but there are a lot of lists out there. We've been creating a lot of lists of our AI inventories and what AI we have out there. I would say that lists are great, but they're static, and you do that once a year, twice a year. AI is changing on the hour. I mean, literally, you've got models changing. You've got, as soon as you start touching that system, it's interacting with it, and it could be, changing. And we've seen this kind of what we were talking about earlier. I would say that it is critical that agencies have a very strong lens into what those AI agents and AI models are doing. You need to understand the inputs and the outputs. You need to understand what guardrails are in place, how the agents are interacting, how the AI is being used, and also what's being inputted. What are your members putting in? Are they putting in CUI data? Are they putting in data that might be sensitive? How's that data being used? All of that needs a very strong lens, and so you have to have observability and visibility into that. And I think that's one of the places where we're getting better, but there is a lot of room for improvement, because I think we're really focused on just building those AI lists, but not really looking into deeply what the AI itself is doing.
So I'm seeing that there are needs for AI risk management everywhere, from governance and managing the different aspects of trustworthy AI. NIST uses the AI RMF, the AI Risk Management Framework, to really address, map, measure, manage, and govern those aspects. In the cybersecurity and privacy realm, we have the cybersecurity framework, identifying what those cybersecurity risk principles are. What are those high-level practices? NIST is developing a cybersecurity AI, cybersecurity framework profile for AI, for doing cybersecurity, for using AI in cybersecurity as well. So we're really excited about those efforts. So we've started at the top with overall AI governance. We're looking at the cybersecurity governance level, and even at the implementation level, which Willie, you were just talking to. We are taking and augmenting the 853 controls that agencies know, love, and or hate, and augmenting that to address specific, unique cybersecurity and privacy risks. How do we extend, how do we tailor, how do we customize these outcomes that you already are familiar with for this new context, for the different kinds of risks and threats that each type of AI system, whether it's something as simple as a predictive AI system, to addressing how we manage the security and the privacy when you're using agents. So NIST has that portfolio stack all the way from governance down to implementation. We even offer kind of a test methodology for evaluating trustworthiness. So we've really got that whole stack in terms of the standards, the guidelines, that Rosetta Stone for a common language for agencies, for private sector to use. And we really are excited as we continue to release these and draft. We want to engage with all stakeholders to make sure that the solutions, the frameworks that we're developing and augmenting really fit the need now and provide you that approach as this continues to evolve. Because I can guarantee you one thing, even if everyone at NIST is working as fast as we possibly can, by the time we release something, it's going to be out of date. That's why the approach is so important, so that we all can continue to build off that body of knowledge.
Yeah, and talking about building off that body of knowledge, Dylan, I'll turn it back over to you. So when we think about securing AI, we often think about data or the systems. What role does identity management play in that? So could you talk more a bit about that?
Certainly. Well, there's the human identity as well as the non-human identities. And the non-human identities outweigh the human identities on the internet by about 144, maybe 150. It might be as high as that today, but 144 to 1. So there's agents out there that are authenticating with each other, transacting with each other, conducting more business than you can do in a day on your behalf. And what's concerning to me is that when we build agents, I've built agents and I have a ton of them running for me and they're great, but they also inherit my objectives as well as my vulnerabilities or my weaknesses. And that's where I become very concerned, in that if you're doing a financial transaction, how are you verifying that sending agent that's going through an intermediary actually trusts and has verified the receiving agent or the intermediary agent as a validated and bona fide agent that can be trusted. And so I think the trust standard at the agent level is something that is emergent and important, because if we're doing transactions, if we're doing operations, whatever that may be at scale of agents and machines, then we are at a much larger blast radius and risk scale than if it were a human. Now, the human aspect of this worries me as well, because trust is the new vulnerability, right? You can't patch a person, you can't patch a human, but you can train them in resilience. You can also build underlying practices and standard operating procedures beneath them that are pressure tested. But if you're not pressure testing them on the latest battlefield landscape or cybersecurity risk landscape, how do you know how they'll stand up under pressure? If I call into a help desk and say, hey, this is General so-and-so, I'm just flying back from London and I left my phone in a taxi. I had to buy a new phone at the iPhone store in the airport. Can you reset my MFA to this new phone number? Thank you very much. And then 5 minutes later, I call back to a different help desk associate and say, hey, I just got this new phone. You already saw my other ticket. I need to reset my password. Can you reset it to password 123 exclamation point? Great. Now I've got two halves of a whole, and now I've got unfettered access into the network, and I can escalate privileges, live off the land, and expand from there and do all my nefarious activities. And so there's both an agentic aspect of identity and the potential for impersonation or deception, as well as the soft vulnerability of the humans and what's in between our ears, which is the softest target to go after.
The brain. All right, so we have time for one more question that I'll ask you, but then we'll turn it over to audience questions. So if you all want to ask our panelists anything, feel free to line up behind that mic behind the photographer. All right, so we've talked about a lot of different parts that are working together. How can industry and government work together? What are the opportunities for collaboration to help us all move forward? Nick, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to how we can leverage every place where we already are collaborating. So thinking about the extension to the Cyber Information Sharing Act as one starting point. So thinking about the importance of the speed and the detail that is provided when, whether it's in the private sector or public sector, we're seeing something that looks sketchy and we're communicating that quickly. We've seen too often that if one part of a critical infrastructure is being affected by something, it probably is being affected in other places. If they're not talking, or if the government isn't trying to facilitate that communication, then as a nation, we're not going to be well prepared to protect. So I think that's an important piece. The other part is engaging in meaningful conversation about what, and this is already happening to some extent, but what does good legislation look like, and then how is that appropriately implemented? It's going to have an impact on all of us. So I think that, to me, it's an important piece, is just to be thinking about, okay, if this is flipping on its head a lot of the ways that we are conducting oversight, if it's flipping on its head the way that we're thinking about, okay, if it's a given that a vulnerability is going to be found, how are we monitoring activity to prevent, the most catastrophic consequence to it? It's going to take a full collaboration. Yeah.
And Victoria, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think this is, I hate to say it, sound really cheesy and be the first one to have a dad joke, gentlemen. I'm disappointed in you.
Thank you.
Cybersecurity is a team sport. You've seen the priorities of this administration, where federal agencies have been directed to leverage what private sector has to offer. Private sector is able to innovate, develop tools and solutions faster than how government has historically been able to. How can government securely adapt this, take advantage of the resources that are outside of government and integrate it into our missions? But we have to do so in a risk-informed and measured way, because at the end of the day, federal agencies do have a different mission than private sector. We have different consequences and different risks, but we need to leverage the good and the innovation and the speed that is out there. On the flip side, in terms, obviously, so public-private partnership, first and foremost, always. But if you specifically want to engage with NIST on all of the activities I was talking about, from updates to the AI RMF, to the CSF AI profile, to the work on security and privacy control overlays, NIST has so many different ways that you can engage directly with us or those subject matter experts, so you can share your expertise, so you can share your feedback on our drafts, engaging in different working groups and collaborations as we're building this plane. We are literally building this plane right now. All three of those planes are being built, and we need you to participate with us to make our work product better, so we can raise all boats together. So many different ways to engage specifically with NIST to really inform best practices, the standards and guidelines that are coming for all of us.
Thanks, Victoria. And Willie, I'll give you the choice. I don't see any questions yet, but giving you all another opportunity to walk up. All right, Willie, now here's your choice. You could tell us a dad joke or answer. While some agencies have a variety of maturities in their AI strategies, what separates agencies from integrating AI into security operations versus those that are just using AI for AI's sake?
So, I've had some dad jokes that my kids would say, would make them groan. I was going to do a dance off later because we do that with my kids.
We're still on for that.
But we'll save that for last. So I would say, from my vantage point, what separates what really good looks like, the agencies that are really doing kind of yeoman's work when it comes to deploying AI and not just AI for AI's sake, are the ones that are focused on mission outcomes. And I think we kind of talked about this. The agencies that really are doing great work are the ones that are taking an actual problem that they have. It could be anything as simple as, I'm running a knock or a SOC, and I'm inundated with alerts, and I can't really, my teams don't even have enough time to do their real work. So maybe we're bringing AI to help with root cause analysis. We're going to help AI, triage some of these problems and help us get some of our hours back. Or it could be, a call center that is, the queues are too long. So they're bringing in AI for a very specific purpose to help bring those queue lengths down. So they found a problem. They're not bringing in AI for AI's sake or just for having a project, but they're really trying to solve a problem. I think tacked onto that, the agencies that are really doing a good job too is that they're taking, like Victoria was saying, they're taking that NIST framework, they're taking those best practices, and they're doing the hard work. And I don't see every agency doing this, but the ones that are looking at the data, making sure they're getting good data into the system, they're curating that data, they're training their people on how proper usage of the system, they're doing the hard work of ensuring that they've got proper integrations in the systems and so forth. So again, that's, I think, some of the unglamorous side of it, but those are the parts that the agencies that are tackling that, they are actually having good results. And then finally, I would be remiss in saying if, the agencies that are also doing it well and the ones that I work with closely are the ones that are putting observability into their AI. They're putting telemetry into their AI, and they have a very tight lens on what those models are doing. What's their token utilization? Are my guardrails working? Is PII coming in? Is CUI data coming in? We're actually, those are the ones that are really being successful. But then you do have AI projects that are out there because, I want to have an AI project on my list, and it might show as a good demo. It might show as, hey, this is a nice chatbot, but if it doesn't have a good outcome, if I'm not showing a positive outcome, is that really something I want to tout? So that's kind of what I see from my standpoint is what good looks like when it comes to AI versus just AI for the sake of AI.
Just to put a cherry on top of that, as NIST begins to issue these standards and guidelines, having vendors, having our private sector partners being able to express not only the functions and the features of what your solutions provide, but how they meet those trustworthy goals, those security requirements that we have in place, really lowers that barrier to entry if we are trying to speak that same language. Because otherwise, let's speed up this whole process where we can, right?
If I could just add one more point to that, because I think it's really important, especially everyone from industry who's here. I have always been a big advocate for, you mentioned public-private partnerships, but having these feedback loops between industry and standards orgs and the agencies, so we can build also into the platform. And this is what we should be doing, and that's what I advocate even for our company, that we're building into our model. I mean, into our platform, where we can help provide the best practices that maybe NIST has already put out around AI. So I can help provide the evidence that I know the customer is going to need to show that we're doing a good job, or I can put in that repeatable process that NIST has laid out. I make it really super simple for the agency because I built that in my workflow. So that's, I think, just to that.
We had a really good pep talk backstage. You could tell, right?
Yeah, you really can. And I think that's a great point to end on. Well, Dylan, were you going to say something? You were looking at me.
No,
Gears are turning.
They were turning. Thank you very much for hearing the hamsters running.
Yes.
But I think going back to a little bit how agencies can really rethink and reshape their approach is everyone, I would say the majority of everyone in this room is focused on defense and on building this fortress, a very solid wall in which we can run our operations. I live outside that wall. And so I come from an offensive background in the military and think a little bit differently. And so one of the things I think is, while you're defending the walls, I'm watching the Huns circle around the fortress and lay their ladders onto those walls and build them. What if you had the opportunity to see those Huns coming over the hills and far away, and to be able to thwart them before they ever got within your perimeter? Because the human no longer has a perimeter, because trust is the vulnerability. And so how do we protect the humans? Well, we prevent the actual setup of the attack before it ever starts. And so I would encourage every organization out here, every defender out here, to look beyond your fortress walls and look out on the public domain. Look out on the external internet. Look at the impersonations that are out there. Look at the campaigns that are being set up. Look at the domains. Look on LinkedIn and see all of the generals or all of the federal heads that are being impersonated out there, and start to attack those before they actually turn into an actual campaign against your employees, against your team members, against your authorities and leaders, before they erode that trust.
Thank you, Dylan. I'm going to get our producer to make a 1-minute clip of Zygite, Huns, footy pajamas. What else? So thank you all. This was a great discussion, and I'm looking forward to seeing where you all take this moving forward. Oh, I said it twice, but hey. All right, I'll turn it back over to Amy for our next session.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.